managing and protecting the world's grueling number of endpoints, enabling Tanium's customers to see, control, and protect every endpoint everywhere. Tanium's mission is to provide certainty in uncertain times with the industry's only converged endpoint management. Trusted by the U.S. military and the majority of the Fortune 100, Tanium helps manage and protect nearly 30 million endpoints. Tanium, the power of certainty. Visit securityweekly.com/Tanium to learn more. Welcome back to Enterprise Security Weekly. Do you have a specific guest or topic that you want us to cover in one of the shows? Submit your suggestions for guests by visiting securityweekly.com/guests and completing the form. We review suggestions monthly and will reach out to you once reviewed. All right, now for the Enterprise Security Weekly news. It sounded like somebody might have fallen out of their chair. I hope you're okay.
Wasn't me, I swear. I promise it wasn't me.
It was me putting my cat down. He was right in front of the camera. Yeah.
It was the cat in the parlor with the wrench.
Yeah.
Oh, it will be if I don't get up and feed him soon.
Yeah, he does love the camera. He does. Just trying to get some time on the camera. Trying to get his 15 minutes. All right. So you can check out securityweekly.com/ESW302 if you want to follow along. Check out the notes. As usual, we may not get to all the stories, but I managed to pare it down a little bit more this week. We don't have a crazy amount like we did last week. Funding. Pretty quiet with funding, and both the items in funding were somewhat surprising to me. I remember when Netskope raised their Series G, they're like, yeah, we're not really hurting for money. We're just taking this, to add to the war chest, so we have some extra cash, but we're not in a hurry to IPO. We're doing okay. And that was 4 rounds of funding ago. And of course, these are all like Tyler, I don't understand these rounds of funding when it's like, post VC, but pre-IPO, or, it gets into some terminology I'm not familiar with.
Yeah, Adrian, it largely depends on the structure. And sometimes there's no transparency in that structure with regards to a public release right there. And I haven't dug into the last handful of rounds, but
it's a convertible note. This one is a convertible note,
which likely means it's a bit of a convertible debt model, which means that it's a payback of it's a fund where they can pay it back as debt with interest, right? Based off of what they're making on a annual basis in revenue, they pay off the interest and pay off the loan over time, right? If an acquisition occurs, that convertible debt note will convert into an equity stake in the business. Is basically the 300,000 foot view version of what a convertible note is. But yeah, it's tough to know once you get into these big, large money rounds. Like parts of them are secondaries, parts of them are convertible notes, parts of them could be traditional venture, parts of them could be driving toward a majority ownership stake, like a true PE purchase that happens over, say, 2 or 3 tranches over time. There's lots of different ways to structure these deals. So, when you get into the point where this round was $400 million, the last round was $300 million, and the round before that was $300 million. That's just massive amounts of money, right? And I think parts of that is original early stakeholders selling off their stakes to secondary buyers. I think parts of that is, just investment, natural primary investment. There's all different ways you can structure it. So, yeah, it's tough to know, to be honest with you, but this one looks like it's a convertible note that is a debt-based instrument that will convert to equity in the event of an IPO.
Yeah, I'm looking up so it's a total of 1.4 billion that they've raised, and I'm looking for the valuation. But yeah, I mean, you can't directly compare those two. If some of that 1.4 billion is just equity changing hands, right?
Yeah, that's exactly the problem. And then some of it is debt, which will be paid back and may or may not ever convert into an equity stake. So, it's not always apples to apples straightforward when you talk about a total funding amount over the course of through G, and whatever is after G. I can't even do my alphabet.
Yeah, H.
H,
yeah.
I.
But it's funny. They did a venture round. I wonder if they're just trying to avoid calling it a Series H. Just
Oh
like,
my
is it
God.
embarrassing at that point to call it that? But yeah, their
It's a good
valuation is 7.5 billion. But I do get that. I get that sense like nobody wants to. Like everybody's, it seems like everybody's using these alternative fundraising methods to avoid visibly having a down round or visibly, raising a ridiculous, like HIJK,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Is
I mean,
there any historical data on when it just becomes untenable? Because when you start talking about these numbers, okay, on paper, maybe your valuation is whatever you said, 7 point something billion. But in the real world, if you're not getting sold, if you're not going IPO, if you are paying back debt, there has to be some balance. All of this is fictional,
right?
really,
It could
until
be all.
something happens.
I mean, with them being private, it could be all really well balanced. Like we don't know what the revenue is. We don't know what any of the numbers in there. Or, what's being done with this money. So, and it's normal for large corporations to take on debt and to pay off debt and to go through cycles like that, right? So, it's just really hard to tell when all the financials are private.
It's a natural tool in they call it leverage. It's a natural tool in the general concept of a business to lever up with debt, right? And we saw it, in the 80s and 90s quite a bit, in the 80s and late 80s, early 90s, with acquisitions, kind of that corporate raider mentality, come in, buy the company, lever it up, get a bigger valuation based on the leverage, and then resell it off, right? And so it's not uncommon to take on debt. And actually, most cybersecurity companies have at least some form of revolving debt that they run regardless of a convertible note debt model like this is.
Sure, and I think it's not even uncommon outside of the cybersecurity world. There's a huge lending community out there that loves debt, right? But from a business owner point of view, is there some sort of formula based on historical data where you can say, whoa, this is too much, we're going to get into deep water here that we're never going to be able to tread? Or is it just...
It's a tough equation. So we did have to, in business school, do these types of equations. I don't remember the math off the top of my head, but there is a point at which you can't service your debts anymore. And that is the traditional concept of a zombie company, is a company who's taken on enough debt that they can't service their own debts, and they're just on that long walk to death of slowly bleeding themselves out because they can't outpace their debt payments, right? That's what a traditional zombie is. So yeah, you can get yourself in trouble with too much debt, just like a human being can get in trouble with too much debt. If I take out too much debt on my credit card and I can't pay that revolving credit on a monthly basis, it starts to build up and compound, and it can get you in a lot of trouble. Businesses are no different. And leverage gives you the opportunity to make money with money, right? That's why you lever up. You lever up to have free cash flow to then reinvest in the business or to reinvest in some kind of stock or equity, which will return a rate higher than the interest rate that you're paying on the debt, right? And that's the concept of leverage. And so, yeah, if you mislever, you lever too far, you lever at a rate that doesn't make sense against your return, you can absolutely get yourself in trouble.
And Tyler, aren't there companies or say founders that have levered up, so to speak, run up debt with one company and sold or bankrupted it, moved on, started up another one, kind of ran the same scheme?
I'm sure there are. I'm sure there's tons of them that have. You're starting to get into like the risk reward of being a creditor, right? Of actually running lines of credit for companies. You have to understand the risk reward of that, the chance of getting paid back, all of that stuff. And there's all sorts of bond ratings, debt ratings for those types of to hopefully limit those types of activities.
Yeah, so let's lever on to story number 2. So I was really not expecting Hack the Box to come out with a really healthy size Series B, but it was really, really interesting seeing this pop up. I mean, obviously, training. We just got done talking to Isabel about the number of privacy jobs that are going to be out there. Talking globally, millions of privacy jobs, and it's the same for infosec. There's tons of jobs out there. Maybe not as many as some people try and say, but it's a topic for a different time. But I found this really interesting because Hack the Box, if you just tweet out or toot out, if you're on Mastodon, what's your favorite training? Like, where are you going to point somebody that's trying to get into the industry, trying to skill up? A lot of people are going to say Hack the Box. It's going to come right off the top of their head. And Hack the Box kind of made a name for themselves. I just fixed the link, Tyler. I forgot to.
That was supposed to be a back channel that you could answer later, but that didn't work.
Yeah, like I could pretend like everything runs smoothly here, but sometimes links are broken in the show notes, and I fixed them live, as I just did with that one. But yeah, it's an interesting model because usually when you think security training, the first name that comes up is SANS Institute. And one of the things that comes up with SANS is, like that's a common perk of a job. Like, are they going to send you to SANS? Because it can cost $6,000 for the travel and just for the course to go to like a 6-day SANS course. You get a lot of value out of it, but still $6,000. Like somebody starting out in the industry typically doesn't have $6,000 to go off to a SANS course. And SANS does have some other options. But this is really where Hack the Box kind of shines. Like the most money you can spend at Hack the Box is $20 a month. And they've done this amazing job at just making it super easy to jump on their platform and to learn stuff and to take all that training and kind of deliver it, almost a consumerization of like a SANS model where you get instead of the teacher in front of the room, it's just all the exercises you could want. You have your own virtual machines, at that top $20 tier that you can reboot and mess with to your heart's content. And it seems like they did a really good job of, building a more consumer level subscription product, than SANS's kind of monolithic, go to a 6-day course and get a certification product.
Yeah, what's really interesting in this one is the 1.7 million users. Because you didn't fix the link actually properly on the website, I'm not sure if that's daily average users, monthly average users, what it is. And that was a subtle dig at you, Adrian. But
it's fixed.
That being said, 1.7 million users is a lot of users. I'd be interested in knowing what that growth rate is and what the
how many are
the average ARR or MRR per user works out to be, because you're right, it's a consumerization of cybersecurity training, which is absolutely fantastic. They've moved way down market, and what can they do to grow it from here? I mean, I see why they might have got a reasonably large B round to really grow this kind of B2C play.
Yeah, it's a huge community, and if you've used the tool recently, it is like it used to be slick. It's really slick now.
Yeah, and the key to it is having that environment that you can interact with, that you can play around with, that you can actually do the exercises. It's more difficult to have your own lab and then run through using tools and practice an attack against an environment. And the way that these simulations are set up are fairly realistic. They're not always the same. Tyler Robinson and I did a Twitch stream about a year or so ago where he was going through the attacking the environment on a hack the box type environment. And we did it for several hours, and I was providing background ideas around Active Directory and other things that he was working on and trying to do. And it was very interesting because certainly for someone who has a real world experience attacking Fortune 100 companies going against a simulated environment, there are some things that are different, but it's really built around people learning and understanding what's going on and what to look for in the environment. Where are these flags? What are certain things that you can find in the environment? And how can that be interesting from an attacker perspective? I think it's a great way for people to understand it because there are a lot of folks that can read things, but really when they get the experience to try it out and test it out, that's when it really connects for people.
I mean, it's literally a portal into the industry. one of the products they have on their site is they have a job portal. So this is something people are putting on their resumes. Their accomplishments on Hack the Box, and it's it's giving them a path into the industry, which is something the industry needs. So it's kind of cool to see them kind of to turn that into this, especially for people, that find it challenging to find $6,000 and get to Virginia Beach or, Atlanta or wherever you're taking, Phoenix, wherever you're taking your SANS course.
Oh, and $6,000 is the start of it. I mean, as you said, it's like $6,000 for the course, potentially more, plus hotel, plus travel.
Yeah.
I mean, I went to a SANS course years ago when it was much cheaper, and it was the Swan and Dolphin in Florida, which was fantastic. Thankfully, my company paid for it. But yeah, if you're starting in the industry,
same.
That's just not going to happen.
Yeah, same. That's the only way I've ever made it to a SANS course is when the company's paying for it. And too often I worked for a company that wouldn't pay for it. I mean, I love the training I got. It's just not as accessible as this, and it's not going to, with that model, you're not going to be able to train up as many people as with the Hack the Box one. I mean, I think they both have their place. It very much is a perk, I think, for employees because it's kind of like a mini vacation. Like a lot of the SANS events are in places that are nice to visit. And you get to network and meet in person with other people. So they both have their place. It's, I'm not trying to punch down on SANS Institute in any way. It's just, I think Hack the Box really filled a niche that needed filling.
Yeah, and you can do it from the comfort of your own home as well, which relates directly to what people have been looking for, a virtual environment, not just a virtual training, but something they can do on their own time, at their own pace, and have an environment where they can mess around, they can break stuff and reset it. And it's not that expensive either, which I think is why systems like this, services like this can become very popular, certainly in the 1+ million range.
Yep. And I bet they killed it in the pandemic. I bet they absolutely killed it in the pandemic.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I don't know how much SANS had to cancel events, but go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, I was going to say, like one of you said, it definitely feels a niche, but I wouldn't worry about the SANS and other in-person training companies because there are people who do like the in-person events. There are people who learn better in an in-person environment. So I think this is great, especially for those who either won't or can't get sponsored by their company or at least, some sort of support, or who can't or won't travel for whatever reason. But I think there's a good place for both types of learning. And it really depends on who you are and how you learn, because no two people learn the same way.
And it ranges from free forever to $20 a month. So yeah, it's pretty nice.
You can't beat the cost, but I do think that a lot of these in-person trainings will continue to survive for other reasons that may not be fulfilled for those people personally.
So just doing some math, if it's similar to other consumer models that have freemium models, a conservative number would be 51,000 paying members out of that 1.7 million.
If 51,000 at like $10 a month, that's great revenue.
Yeah, and that's at I'm just like pulling from Dropbox from those kinds of companies from the numbers I recall seeing them have. Yeah. Cool. All right. Let's see. So IronNet. IronNet is standing at 30 cents a share on the New York Stock Exchange and has been notified that they're in breach of the requirements. They're not in compliance with the listing requirements. So I don't know what happened here. But I don't know if any of you guys have any insight into this, but this was NSA director, ex-NSA director Keith Alexander is the CEO, and they went public via SPAC last year. And we talked a lot about how, the downsides of SPACs and stuff like that. And it seems to be a mix of things. like the running of the company, the products they chose, whether or not they have product fit. It seems like it's like an NDR product, a network detection and response type product, but they have a lot of services as well. So even from the website, I'm not super clear on what they're selling and what the value prop is.
The kick in that article, if you read it, it says that IronNet lost $77.7 million across the first 9 months of 2022. That was after it went public in 2021. They lost almost $80 million in the first 3 quarters of 2022. Had to cut its staff by 35% in September. And they just never really truly had product market fit, had raised a ton of money, and were just burning cash, didn't know how to build any kind of healthy business. And I think the learning here is that, that SPAC model essentially allows companies to go public without any oversight, without any real understanding of the business. And, it was really capitalizing on a mania of retail investors wanting to have any piece of anything that was new and fresh and high growth. And when everything came collapsing down, so did IronNet right around it. And now they're being delisted. They're under $1. They haven't filed a quarterly report since October. I think, I don't know the exact timing, but I think it's 30 to 45 days, 2 months at most, you have to file your quarterly report after the end of each quarter. They haven't filed a report since October. So this company's not going to make it. It's done. It's toast. It's going to go bye-bye.
And when I look at it, I don't want to draw too many parallels to Theranos, but one of Theranos's issues was a lack of oversight. The board of directors, none of them knew anything about medical technology or medicine or anything like that. They're all just big names from you had Kissinger, you had just some really big names from either government or politics. And it's kind of the same here. Like you look at the advisors and the board, and there's a lot of ex-military on there, a lot of generals, and not a lot of folks who have built startups or cybersecurity startups before. So I wonder if that's how much of that kind of feeds into the what went wrong here.
One thing that I've seen with a lot of security products out there, and I'm not saying this was the case, but is that they seem to have a product that was built to throw out there to see what sticks, and a lot of time wasn't built with what an exact need is in mind, or what customers are actually looking for or need or are looking for. And so I think, I don't know about this specific situation, but certainly there's a lot of companies out there that are saying they do cybersecurity or they do certain types of cybersecurity, and they're backed by AI. I mean, one of the articles I think you have, Adrian, is about the Microsoft investment in ChatGPT. Like, that's really interesting. I think we're hopefully starting to see the shift from, we use AI, and everyone goes, okay, yeah, they use AI, kind of like how people say they use the blockchain, to a situation where it's like, okay, what is the AI actually doing? Let's see the tangible, practical use of that.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, and that'll get you funding. But it's not going to get you the rest of the way.
That plus the word general in front of your name, right? That'll get you funded, especially when you promise hundreds of millions of dollars in military contracts because you are General so-and-so, It was just a fraud all the way through.
Fake it till you make it only gets you so far. I mean,
right.
Sometimes it gets you very, very far, but only gets you so far.
This was a case of fake it till you're dead. That's exactly what they did.
Yeah. Next one, I want to jump to number 7, Tyler, in case you have to leave us. I know you've got a hard stop. I wanted to get your feedback on 10 reasons for VCs to invest in a network of security leaders.
100%. This I skimmed the article today to support this question because I knew you would come to me. 100%. The younger the company, the more they need this kind of network of security leaders, really, and you see it happening quite a bit. There's angel groups such as the Silicon Valley Angels that are all a bunch of security leaders in Silicon Valley that have come together to fund networks. Fund companies. A lot of your VCs out there, in a general sense, will just build a security network, a network of security leaders, so that they have the constant feedback of what the market wants. It's a market representation kind of idea, right? If we have a great cross section of the market of people who are interested in buying the products, who can demonstrate the pain, it helps the VCs know where to put their money to work. It helps the entrepreneurs and founders to know where to execute on their visions and where to take products, how to iterate things faster. This makes total sense. What I see happening here that's going to be interesting is the concept of security, a network of security leaders, or let's call it a security advisory board for a VC, that's been around for years, quite a while actually. What I see happening that's going to be really interesting to track is when those security leaders go, why do we need the VCs? Let's just bundle our money together and invest as a group. And that's what the Silicon Valley cybersecurity angels group really is. It's a bunch of CISOs from Silicon Valley that invest all their own capital into the hottest products and then go buy the products on top of it, right? So you get some ethical conflicts of interest that occur there. And obviously there's no requirement that they buy, but if you're an investor in a company, you're probably going to buy the product and try to support your investment as best you can. It's just a natural connection there. So I'm not calling out SVCI as being unethical. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm simply saying that model lends itself to some issues of potential concern. But this, I see more and more that these network of security leaders are putting their money to work directly themselves instead of even going through VCs.
Yeah. Yeah, and just to clarify, it sounds like he's intending this for a general VC audience, not for VCs that just invest in cybersecurity companies, right? Are you reading that the same way?
I think he's just generic about it, right? The way I understood it is, look, if you're putting money to work in cyber, have intelligent people on the market around you. That's how you can distill it very basically. If you're putting money to work in finance, have a bunch of CFOs and a bunch of financial experts on your staff, and it helps you in just so many ways. I don't think Mike Prevet was really targeting any specific group with it, just stating that if you're putting money to work in cyber, you ought to have the people that are your buyers right there alongside for you.
Okay, I kind of read it a little differently, as if he was like pitching to general VCs that a network of security folks is good to have even for your like non-security investments.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that, right? I don't know who he's writing it to, but I think it's a universal truth. Wherever you're putting money to, have expertise in your pocket. That's really what the statement is.
Let's see. So Windows 7 and Windows 8.1 are done. So clearly we've got none of those still running anywhere in the enterprise. Those are all gone.
Oh, all over the place. See those all the time.
Windows 7 was released. Windows 7 was released October 22nd, 2009.
Wow.
Yep, still out there. Even probably a bigger deal, for at least from my perspective, is the fact that Server 2012 R2 lose support in this October, so in about 9 months. And there's still a lot of domain controllers out there in Active Directory that are running on 2012 R2, as well as 2008 R2.
Hey, on the bright side, there are probably IoT devices out there running that haven't received a firmware update since before Windows 7 came out. Right.
Today I learned, right?
Or ever, really.
Or ever, yeah.
Yeah.
It could be 20.
What really surprised me when I looked up the release date of Windows 7. I forgot Windows 7 was the predecessor to Windows Vista. And if I remember back, Windows Vista was like, that's the game changer.
Successor, not predecessor. Successor.
Oh, it's the successor to Vista. Okay. Yeah, I misread that. You're right. I was reading it as the predecessor, and I was like, holy smokes, it was pre-Vista? That's really a long time ago.
No,
it was 2000 Me XP Vista 7.
The fact that you remember that is going to be fantastic. When you watch Jeopardy in like 10 years.
Yeah.
So someone has bingo now on the Microsoft operating system bingo. You have bingo. You're welcome.
All right. I feel like every time one of those happens, a version of Windows gets discontinued, like we're kind of required to mention on any, just in case somebody somewhere still has a Windows 7 box somewhere that's critically important for the enterprise, and they just didn't realize it's discontinued. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Every time a new version
Now you
of
know.
every time a new version of Windows gets retired, a butterfly gets its wings, Adrian. Think of it that way.
Yeah.
For someone who doesn't watch It's a Wonderful Life, that's quite the paraphrased quote.
Is that from It's a Wonderful Life? Did I do that?
It's a paraphrase. You know, a teacher says, anytime a bell rings, an angel gets its wings.
Wow, I had no idea. That's crazy. I just have heard the statement a bunch.
That's funny. Let's see. So number 5, I was kind of excited to see. Basically, somebody decided to, put together a website that kind of rounds up all the most popular open source security tools, which I think is pretty handy. They've got some insights into what languages they use, what license they're using. So it's kind of a cool tool.
You know what I would love to see that for? I wonder if they have historical data. I should reach out to them. I would love to know the historical data and trends on these, meaning if you could track them over time, the index score over time, it could be indicative for an investor like me. It could be indicative of new areas for investment, specifically because you're starting to see essentially rapid usage of some kind of open source component to it. And so, Metasploit framework, bad example, right? Because that's been around forever. It's at the top. It's Vol management. But you could start to see like OS Query. I remember when OS Query picked up 5-6 years ago when it came out, tracking those trends of things like operating system instrumentation as a market and how quickly maybe groupings or versions of those that are kind of the similar solution are trending forward could really be useful in aiding in investment ideas.
That's a smart idea. Yeah, there's there's a Ruby linter called RuboCop.
It's pretty good.
Hey, it's open source. You can name stuff whatever you want.
It just tickled me for whatever reason. RuboCop.
Tailscale is 23rd on the list, and that's a pretty fascinating and interesting VPN project where you can have different VPN connections. It's super easy to set up and scale. Pretty cool.
Yeah, and I do know of a handful of investors that that's literally what they've done for the last couple of years is they looked at stars. They didn't look at even an index score. They simply looked at stars and growth of stars over time and started to look for new markets and started to look for companies that might productize an open source product.
That's super interesting. See, so number 8 here, this is a YouTube video. It launches you kind of into when she starts to talk about it. But M. Herrera is she works for a VC firm, and it's a VC firm that focuses on consumer investments. But she spent so this week in startups. So it's kind of funny, Tyler. Like you got me into the All In podcast, and then that led me to This Week in Startups. Which is
Jason Calacanis's.
Yeah, Jason Calacanis's thing. And then they have this thing at the end called OK Boomer, where they've got some younger folks in the industry. Rachel Braun and M. Herrera are discussing 2023 predictions. And one of M. Herrera's predictions is personal cybersecurity. I've heard of consumer cybersecurity. First time I've heard the term personal cybersecurity, which I like better than consumer cybersecurity. But she mentioned she slots personal cybersecurity companies into 6 categories, but didn't mention what the categories were. So I immediately reached out to her. If anyone knows M, I immediately reached out to her, DM'd her on Twitter, and said, "Hey, we would love to have you on the podcast." Haven't gotten a response yet, so if anybody knows her, I might have been too excited about it. I was like, we could talk about this, and then we could talk about this.
She immediately went into who's that creeper mode.
Yeah, she's probably blocked me. I don't know. Maybe I was too excited.
Yeah, this is definitely the first time I've heard of personal cybersecurity. Definitely years ago, heard about cybersecurity consultants for celebrities.
Yep. I've seen 3 or 4 of those at least. I'm sure there's a lot more.
I was talking to
it's not just celebrities. I mean, major firms will cover their executives with digital risk protection. It happens pretty frequently. if you're at a company that may do something controversial, which is almost every company, or have somebody at your company who does something executives are targets all the time. So that's what digital risk protection is, and it's a huge market.
Yeah,
and there's definitely a blend into the PR space as well. I mean, certainly if a CEO goes on a podcast of some sort and says something that's controversial, that can have a backlash to the company and stock prices.
I was talking to
hypothetically, of course.
Exactly. Hypothetically speaking, I was talking to a friend of mine today, actually, and I won't mention his name because the business is an interesting business to say the least. He's got a massive business that makes significant money scrubbing personal information off of the internet for very, very famous people you've seen in movies, famous people you've seen as politicians and senators and
Xerofox.
Yeah, well, he's just doing it all by hand. He's got a small team of folks that go out and do it by hand, and they rake down absolutely fat checks, cleaning up things that people don't want available on the internet any longer. And that's hard to do. There's certainly a lot of legal ways to do it, and there's certainly a lot of illegal ways to do that too, right? Many times you have to. He said you had to even hack into places to remove content. So, there's a market for the personal side of cyber for sure. It's just I would love to hear how M chops it up.
Yeah, and she does talk about it some in that YouTube video, but she doesn't go into the 6 categories. So I'm left wondering what those might be. Might be something she's not planning to share, part of an investment strategy, which is fine. But I'm curious. All right, let's see. I'm going to jump back a couple of these. So we've got some trends here. We've got CloudSec trends, which I've kind of bundled together. One of them asks the questions, are threat actors gaining cloud skills faster than enterprises? Which kind of dovetails into...
Yes, they are. They absolutely are. I can tell you that cloud security is very challenging.
Yeah, I'm looking for the article, but I had one that was about freejacking, and I hadn't heard the term freejacking before, but it's basically you open up a lot of free accounts on something like GitHub, AWS, Azure, where you get trial access and you get compute based on that trial access. And basically they're stealing compute from trials. It's account fraud. Basically, I don't know if there's a better name for it, but as long as that trial exists, and they're defeating captchas, like some of the technology they're using is defeating captchas, because I saw something that said one of these campaigns was opening 3 to 5 new GitHub accounts every second, and just using the storage and the compute, from these cloud accounts, from these different SaaS accounts, to take control of stuff. Oh, it was number 15. How a single developer dropped AWS costs by 90%, then disappeared. So basically that's what he was doing, is he was taking their AWS workloads, shoving them into these free trial accounts, and then collected his check. Because a lot of times you see these where if they save the company money, they get a percentage of the money that they save them, or maybe a lump sum that they agree on in the contract. So as soon as he got his check, he disappeared. And of course, as soon as those trials ran out, that 90% savings went right back up, because you can't run those workloads in those free accounts anymore. So it all deferred back to the main account again. And often
the size of the instance you're allowed to run in AWS is limited if you're on a trial as well. So I wonder if they were just using a whole bunch of them.
But if you have 1 million trial accounts, who cares what the instance size is?
True.
That's true. If it's a workload that you can distribute easily, if it's designed to be distributed. Yeah,
absolutely.
So funny.
But no, I can tell you that it is challenging. Cloud security is a very different paradigm from on-prem stuff. So a lot of enterprises, a lot of businesses are trying to keep up with what cloud security actually means from an identity and infrastructure perspective. And the attackers are ahead of the curve on this, unfortunately.
Yeah, Tyler, what did you want to discuss with the cloud security stuff?
Oh, I didn't bring that one up.
Oh, that was Sean. Sorry.
That was Sean.
That was me.
When I look closer at the Slack, your names do look different.
I'll put a
Apologies.
picture on there eventually, I promise.
Was that the one that you wanted to cover, Sean?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. And then if there's anything else we cover here, we don't have to discuss it, but number 17, take some time and read number 17, like especially with the IoT conversation we had earlier. I mean, this is just, it's a lesson in the kinds of IoT mistakes that people make, specifically focused on the automotive industry. They hacked into 16 different brands or had hacks that would work on over 16 different brands of automobiles, and it's all API hacking, single sign-on type hacks, web app hacks, just crazy
things
stuff
never
that they were able
change,
to.
Adrian. Some things never change.
No.
Charlie. Oh gosh, I can't remember Charlie's last name. Charlie and Valasek were the two folks.
Charlie Miller.
Yes, Charlie Miller and Chris Valasek.
Chris Valasek. Yeah.
10 years ago or more, we're doing these car hacks in Vanity Fair. I mean, this is the same thing, just rinsed, repeated many times over. It's like we have not learned at all in the last decade on how to secure IoT devices, or in this case, moving vehicles.
So they're not incentivized. They're just not incentivized to do it. That's all.
And this is just Sorry, go ahead, Katie.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, this is just a group of like bored hackers and bug bounty hunters, that were like they noticed a few low hanging fruit, and they're like, I wonder how deep this goes. I wonder how common this stuff is. And they just systematically hit the whole auto industry. And this is the result. This is 5 years of just, hey, what kind of low hanging fruit, easy bugs can we find that allow us to unlock doors, and turn on engines and roll down windows.
They got paid well.
Yeah, I think the issue here is monetization, right? Like, okay, these might not be the worst hacks, the hardest hacks to complete. This might not take the most time, effort, skill, whatever. But in the real world, how is an attacker, how is a cyber criminal going to monetize this versus some of the other things that they can do and monetize much more easily?
Yeah. So on the digital license plate, they could mark your license plate. A feature of this digital license plate is that if an owner's car gets stolen and it has this digital license plate on it, which is like an e-ink display, and this is only legal in California. California's made digital license plates legal, which I had no idea about until I saw this. But you can mark it as stolen. You can report your digital license plate as stolen. And when they found out they could get basically full access to the database and update whatever they wanted, they could. So you can then ransom somebody's car from them. Like, it's the classic example of like everybody's been worried about, okay, what if I get into my Tesla and there's like, a ransom note on the screen and I can't start it anymore. So you're almost getting into those.
You could do that, or you could hit every employee in the U.S. with phishing for the same effort.
Right. So they could hit every person who had ever bought one of those license plates, or every.
But that's a much smaller pool.
Tesla owner.
But that's a much smaller pool.
Still millions or tens of thousands. Like, that's not that small.
Yeah, but I think where she's going with this is that there's no financial ROI incentive for mass compromise, and that's why you're not seeing anybody putting any time into actually fixing the problem.
Exactly.
Right. But money isn't the only, like one of the problems that we've had with mobile operating systems and stuff like that are, app stores allowing these stalker apps and stuff like that. And, an ex boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, installs this on their partner's phone, or ex-partner's phone. Like, there's other motives that you have to protect against here.
Yes.
Yeah, and a big one around stalking is one of the things here. It says that under the Hyundai Genesis list, it was fully remote, lock, unlock, engine start, stop, precision locate, honk vehicles using only the victim's email address. So if you can precision locate where a car is based on knowing the email address, that's pretty targeted. A lot of these are interesting from the perspective of the scale and scope of it. The Spyrion one is ability to fully take over any fleet which includes, they said, track and shut off starters for police, ambulance, and law enforcement vehicles for a number of different large cities and dispatch commands to those vehicles, including navigate to this location. And under Spyrion is Gold Star, LoJack, Fleet Locate, Inspire, Trailer Assist. And they noted that there were 15.5 million devices, mostly vehicles. Like, that's a big deal, especially when it impacts emergency vehicles.
Yeah, ransom a whole police station.
But you have a different kind of attacker who's going to be looking at that.
Sure. There's lots of different attackers out there.
And the incentive for that is completely different. And so much cybercrime is just based on money, and it's a lot easier to do a lot of other things. And part of the reason we haven't seen the situation change, we haven't seen the balance shift, is because these hacks theoretically could happen, but where are the attacks actually happening? What's happening in reality? What do we have to deal with first? And yeah, sure, you could I mean, there are all kinds of scenarios that could happen that are catastrophic and worst case and shutting down cities and making things horrible. But we got to deal with the things that are in our faces at much larger scale first. And I think that's really what we're dealing with here. And that's the reason that, Charlie Miller and Chris Valasek were talking about this years ago. They spoke for me many years ago when I was producing conferences, and great talk. But the reason it hasn't changed is because the incentives aren't there.
I think it's more than incentive, though. I think it's more of a newer area, a newer field. Certainly the impact is different. I mean, if you can go out and ransom a number of computers at a large company and the company's going to pay you $5 million through Bitcoin, sure, there's incentive there. I think that there's a lot of risk for different types and categories of people, as well as different types and categories of situations and organizations. Certainly fleet management of enterprise or Hertz or, a rental car company out there that has fleet management on everything, being able to get in and track certain people within that organization, that's likely happening today, whether people are tracking and ensuring that or monitoring the situation or not. So what that tells me is there's a privacy risk, much like what we were talking to Isabel about. But to your point, Katie, until there is a financial incentive where, okay, you're going to have to pay $5 million to fix this or you don't, and that there's cyber insurance around it that you have to pay a premium to protect you or you don't, I think that definitely plays into it. So I get what you're saying. I will say that there's different motivations of attackers, and there's a lot of attackers out there that are doing things very stealthily, from the perspective of what they want to do, what they want to track and identify and get information about different people, much like the attackers that went after a large hotel chain's reservation system to identify where they were and when they were moving from place to place. That's probably my biggest concern around these sort of vulnerabilities that are in systems that have been assumed that they are okay, but as we connect more of these car systems to the internet and provide more capabilities and more technology, we end up moving into an area where there's a lot more attacker opportunity, and that's something the industry definitely needs to be aware of and start looking at. But I agree about the incentive and motivation argument that you have, Katie.
And related to this, story number 14, John Deere has agreed to stop ransoming their customers. I mean,
finally, the right to fix comes through.
Allowing U.S. customers to repair their own equipment, which has been a big deal for a while. And to give you an idea of the level of ridiculousness this gets to is if you turn your tractor on. I remember talking to Sick Codes back when he was prepping for DEF CON, and he had a bunch of vulnerabilities he found in John Deere equipment. He said if you turned your whether it's a tractor, whatever kind of equipment you have from John Deere, on and off 5 times in one day, it locks you out, and somebody has to physically come out and unlock that for you to be able to use that piece of equipment again.
Ridiculous. Absolutely.
Just because you rebooted, the OS too many times.
Ridiculous.
Yeah. So it says U.S., farmers. So apparently this only applies to the U.S. John Deere is very global. A lot of farmers in Indonesia, different countries, dealing with some of the same issues. So it'd be great to see this go more global. But it seems like we're making progress with them. Hopefully that work that SIC codes did created some goodwill and some visibility around the problems there. I think the last one we'll talk about before we wrap here is number 19, passwords at the U.S. Department of the Interior. Anybody get a chance to look at this one?
I did. Yeah. So 18, it's according to this, the article says that, it's a document, looks like as part of an inspection or audit. They cracked 18,174 of the department's Active Directory user accounts, which included 288 accounts with elevated privileges and 362 senior government employee accounts. They said in the first 90 minutes of testing, their hash cracking system obtained clear text passwords for 13,924, which were 16% of about the 86,000 department Active Directory user accounts. So yeah, I mean, this is not surprising to me at all. Most of the passwords that are out there are bad. We do assessments for AD environments, and the vast majority of them have password minimum length requirements between 7, which is the Active Directory default, and 10. Which is just ridiculous. You can password spray and guess those pretty quickly. What they were able to do, because it's an inspection, they got the Active Directory database, were able to dump it, and then went through password cracking in order to basically brute force it. The fact that they could find so many in a short amount of time is not surprising to anyone that deals with this on a regular basis. I wouldn't be surprised if you could throw in almost any name or most names of different organizations, potentially government and others, in there, and it'd still be pretty close to valid. MFA, multi-factor, second factor, they note wasn't implemented on a number of systems that should have been there. They said 89% of its high-valued assets. Again, not surprising. Multi-factor in Active Directory is challenging, and a lot of the government systems have been shifting over to smart cards, which have been around for a very long time, using the PKI system. But as we've seen in the past couple of years, PKI can have a number of weaknesses if not set up correctly. So it's really a challenging situation. We should be focused on better systems than passwords, but it's what we have right now, right?
So the $1 million question here is, do we put more efforts into trying to get employees, maybe require more complexity, more of these audits, or do we just try to minimize the importance of passwords, and reduce our dependence on it? Like, do we put the effort in both places, or is it just time to move on from passwords and push into FIDO stuff and better methods of authentication?
I think with most things, it's nuanced, right? There's this balance. So I think that the best thing that any organization can do today is have some sort of password filtering solution to filter out the bad passwords immediately. So Azure AD Password Protection provides this. If you have an Active Directory environment and you have Azure AD, depending on your licensing, you have Azure AD Password Protection. It uses the same model that it uses, kind of fuzzy logic, to identify if a password is bad. So it understands that password 1 is the same as P @ SSWORD 1, and so on and so forth. And it enables you with shorter, smaller rule sets to be able to identify a lot of bad passwords, including a custom word list. So it also understands that winter 2022 is a bad password, and will force the user through the standard method to enter a password that's going to be worthwhile. NIST, in their documentation that says we shouldn't be forcing users to change passwords, actually says you should not force users to change passwords. But we also think that along with this, you should have a password filtering solution. You should also be using MFA. So it's not the situation of stop using passwords or stop forcing password reset, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It's a combination of things that will enable us to get to a better place with passwords where we're at today, until we can get to a situation where we can use FIDO2 compliant solutions, which will enable us to go passwordless.
One day, one
Right.
day, eventually. All right. With that, I think that's yeah. Passwords authentication. It's nuanced. I guess that's the we we still have to deal with this a little bit more. Orlando 0000 was a domain administrator account. All right. And with that, thanks so much, Sean, Tyler, Katie, for joining me today. It was
Thank you, Adrian.
Good episode today, I think.
Absolutely.
Katie didn't notice, but we had the camera on you momentarily, Katie.
It's mostly for the
looking
cat.
at my dog who's snoring.
Yeah. Well, thank you to you, Katie.
She's mad that we went over. She wants to eat.
Okay. Well, let me wrap up and let you go. But thank you to them thank you to your pets for being patient as well. And a big thanks to everybody watching or listening to this week's episode of Enterprise Security Weekly. We will see you next week. Or will we? Okay.
2 weeks.